You have 400 hours of heart rate data and no protocol. The gap lives in your insular cortex. Critchley and Garfinkel showed that feeling your heartbeat accurately, without a watch, rewires insular pathways and turns squiggles on a screen into actual commands for your vagal brake. Your wearable captures the signal. Your interoception decodes it. Training that somatic awareness changes everything. Your heart rate variability is the visible ripple of a feedback loop between your prefrontal cortex and your brainstem, and Thayer and Lane named the architecture in 2009. Coherence along that route means executive function and parasympathetic tone rise together. Fragment the pathway and your morning score becomes noise without a trend. That is why multi-day patterns matter more than single spikes. The data is real. The biology is named. The question is whether your breathwork, your thermal exposure, your sleep architecture actually speak back to the loop in a language it recognizes. Your wearable tracks the vagal ripple, but it misses the sympathetic surge written in electrodermal activity. Bishop et al. Showed skin conductance spikes precede conscious arousal by seconds. That signal carries the sympathetic transcript your ring ignores. Meanwhile, when breathwork actually shifts autonomic balance, Lutz et al. Found it produces measurable theta and alpha coherence across the cortex, a neural oscillatory state no consumer wearable detects. The process we saw earlier now looks like a three-way broadcast linking skin, heart, and cortex. Why would evolution spend glucose and myelination on that level of real-time physiological synchronization if the body were only meant to observe it? That hardware is built to be driven. The next question is what happens when you throw thermal stress or sleep debt into that conversation, and the answer reframes every outlier in your dataset. Sleep debt hijacks a vagal brake that is, evolutionarily speaking, brand new hardware. Porges showed it is a mammalian innovation 200 million years younger than the sympathetic panic circuits. One night of fragmented slow-wave sleep forces the older hardware to override the newer brake, and your morning HRV collapses as ancient firmware prioritizes survival over recovery. Thayer et al. Demonstrated that same prefrontal vagal pathway directly fuels next-day executive function. So when sleep architecture crumbles, the cognitive hit is immediate and measurable. That autonomic footprint persists for 72 hours. Whether that duration signals pathology or adaptive resilience depends on a distinction most wearable apps never teach. Lerrer and Vachillo mapped the somatic steering wheel your ring cannot see in 2006. Global autonomic tone is federated, not averaged. A locked jaw or clenched gut can veto the vagal brake while your app flashes green. The consequence is invisible overtraining. You stack hard sessions on a false recovery signal while localized sympathetic debt fragments the cortical coherence Lutz recorded before your HRV ever drops. That lag is not a bug. It is a biological blind spot that hides damage for 21 days while your trendline stays flat. The specific breathing frequency that exposes that veto before the collapse. Beneath that veto, the prefrontal vagal pathway is burning glucose to fake stability. Thayer and Lane mapped the architecture, but they never measured the mitochondrial invoice. That 21-day flatline is active metabolic borrowing. Your cortex pays for parasympathetic cover until the ATP deficit forces sympathetic foreclosure. That breathing frequency we chased earlier only works while the metabolic buffer remains. Once the buffer empties, 6 breaths per minute numbs the alarm without rebuilding the circuit. The clinical question is how long that overdraft lasts before the HRV cliff becomes irreversible. The answer sits in a thermal threshold most protocols ignore. The trigeminal nerve does not negotiate. A 30-second cold pressor to the face, roughly 10 degrees Celsius, triggers the mammalian dive reflex and forces a vagal rebound that rebuilds the prefrontal brake faster than breathwork once that metabolic buffer runs dry. That same intervention rescues the somatic veto we tracked earlier, restores the cortical coherence Lutz mapped, and clears the sympathetic transcript Bishop found hiding in electrodermal activity. Your wearable misses the rebound. Your skin and cortex register it. One specific protocol. Cold exposure, then interoceptive check, then sleep architecture protection. The full research archive and annotated sources for this entire autonomic series are waiting at jmthomasofficial.com. Start there. The entire HRV literature was reviewed in 2012 around one central insight. Your score tracks how dynamically your prefrontal cortex throttles peripheral arousal. Thayer et al. Consolidated that evidence. That changes the goal entirely. Stop chasing a high flat line. Start tracking your autonomic range, the delta between your lowest evening dip and your morning rebound. When that range compresses, the metabolic buffer we saw earlier is closing, and the somatic veto is already active. Your actionable protocol is simple. For 7 days, log that delta alongside the cold to interoception to sleep sequence. A widening gap means the circuit is rebuilding. That is the only trend that matters, and the data you collect next week will prove it to you. The annotated sources and the full protocol breakdown are at jmthomasofficial.com.